Mike Williams, and welcome to Prince Hall Esoterica. This is our first episode. We're going over the initiation and the rites of passage. This group and all participants, although we are Prince Hall Masons, this is not a part of any Grand Lodge or any Masonic body. Any thoughts and opinions displayed here or mentioned here are of our own and not tied to any Masonic organization or body. Again, I'm Michael Williams, and we have brothers. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good evening. I'm Brother Fields from Jopalon 62. I hail from the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge, Texas.
Brother Vernon Thunderbird, Charlotte, North Carolina.
Brother Mark Alexander, Sons of Kings 123, Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge, New York.
Yeah, this is Brother Charles Watson, Anchorage, Alaska, Summit Lodge number 6, Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Alaska.
Brother House?
No words.
Okay.
He's the silent assassin.
I think he might be having a
Brother
little...
House, your mic is messed up.
Yeah, your mic is off, brother.
You still muted.
Not muted, no sound.
We'll come back to him. Brother Greenway. Well, I'll just introduce everybody. We got Brother Greenway, Javon Greenway.
There you go. You're on mute.
Hello?
We
Hello?
got Brother Steve Barrett. Go ahead.
Okay. Brother Javon Greenway, St. James Lodge, number 114 out of Brooklyn, New York, under the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of New York.
Brother Stephen Barrett out of St. Mary's Lodge, New York.
Brother Barrett, I can hear you, but it's really, really low.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Yeah. Brother Stephen Barrett at St. Mary's Lodge number 4 in Harvard, Michigan.
Brother Leonard.
Brother Leonard just typed in the chat box. He just said, yes, sir.
Okay, we got Brother Leonard on the microphone. We got him in the chat as well. And Brother Tim Fields and Brother Akoni S. Vaughn Sr.
Yes, sir. Hail from the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Maryland, Worshipful Master for St. James 106.
And I am Michael Williams of Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Oklahoma. All right, and tonight, like I said, we're doing the Prince Hall Esoterica Episode 1, Initiation Rites and Rites of Passage. I'm going to start off with the definition initiation. And initiation is basically an act or instance of initiating, the process of being initiated. It's tied to rites and ceremonies, ordeals, instructions, and basically a group of people bring a member into a sect or a society. And the condition of being initiated into some experience or sphere of activity or coming to a sense of knowledge. per se. When you look at a rite of passage is nothing more than the constitution of initiation or a milestone and a change in statuses. And most ancient communities, and still some today, found in Africa, South America, Europe, and many indigenous countries, they still have rites of passage where you're basically going from a child into adulthood. Most initiation practices or rites of passage or for teenagers going into manhood, starting between the ages of 14 and 16, from the research I've gathered. And but it's not just initiation or rites of passage as far as becoming a member of society or a group, but marriage, death, anything can be seen as a rite of passage. Excuse me. When you look at initiation, there's always 3 steps or 3 phases, and most of them are dealing with death, life, and birth. I always start off with death because I believe the spirit comes first, then you're born again, and then you become a living soul, or you're living this life at this moment. And with that being said, this is the plane of life and the plane of existence we're on, and we're in the middle of initiation. Although we go through initiation rites inside of a lodge, and per se, those to me are not signal, but symbolic representations of our day-to-day life and what we go through on a normal basis. I see initiation as something that a person obtains daily, each moment, moment to moment, and death, life, and birth is a continual cycle. Our cells are multiplying, dividing, dying every moment, every second. You look at the earth, the planet, we got people born every second at a time. We got people dying every second. And it's just a continual cycle. It's a continuum. The bottom quote is Psalms 19:7. The law of Jehovah is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of Jehovah is sure, making the wise simple. And the reason I picked that as something to talk about for this discussion is when we look at initiation, the purpose of it is we're simple beings, we're simple creations, and initiation is a spark or a stream of light, as we call it in Masonry, to bring us into awareness or give us that wisdom. And we're building King Solomon's temple to become wise as King Solomon, sitting in the east and things like that, etc. So to me, this verse speaks of us being simple, and we're trying to become wise. To me, death and ritual is something that's psychological. It's a mean of being initiated into a psychological death, putting us in the mind frame of understanding that we are all going to die. And you have to be aware of this process in order to understand and to be initiated into future and further thought, not only in Masonry, but in life. We have to understand to die psychologically. It puts us in a frame of thought and reference that if we know that we're going to die, we're going to enjoy life, and we're going to enjoy living, and we're going to enjoy the births of children, birth of people around us, birth of anything. We don't just sit back and let the grass grow. We watch the grass grow because we know one day we're not going to be able to see it. So when we embrace a psychological death through initiatic rites, we we get put in that mind frame. Death is the goal for the real initiate who is practicing seriously, whether that person is called a Gnostic, Buddhist, Muslim, Hindu, Christian, it's irrelevant. By Gnostic, we mean that those who are acquiring consciousness, spiritual experience, for that person, their spiritual process is a process of dying, not physically, but psychologically. Real spiritual work is the continual practice or process of radical psychological death, in which all that is an illusion, all that is false dies, and we are born in truth, and we cognize of what is real. Then moving on to Genesis, using the King James Version, is in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was out form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And in the Hebrew is Bereshit bara Elohim et ha shamayim ve'et haaretz. And I know Brother House gonna correct me if I mess this up. So, me and him discussed this, but it's not in the beginning, but in a beginning, God created. And when you look at us individually, as individuals, we got over 6-7 billion people on this planet. It's always a beginning. In the beginning, in a beginning, God created. And if we look at our individual gods or our individual Godhead or whatever we call the creator, it's always a beginning with that individual, not anybody else. And that's why when I look at this verse, it's speaking to you as a person. This is your initiation into life. This is your initiation into everything. Everything you create, everything we put our hands on, everything we discuss, we initiate that. And with that, we're creating, and us being a symbolic representation of as above, so below, us being the below, we're those many gods creating things from moment to moment. And this is our Genesis. In initiation, most people don't realize that we are being tried by the elements at all times. We get tried by earth, fire, wind, and water. And one, earth being the natural man, that's us in our natural environment. The fire is that spiritual man, which comes from our heart. The wind, the psychological man, which comes from our mind. And the water, the vital man, which comes from our anatomy. That's our instinctual being of, the Hispanics call chorismo, machismo, or whatever. That's that vital energy. That's, some of it may call it aggressiveness, or, when we're young and scrappy and we want to throw down, whatever. But these trials, they're not just found in life or inside our body, but when we break down ritual, you'll see inside the Masonic ritual that we're constantly being tried by the elements. I don't want to go too deep into the ritual because I don't want to give too much stuff away. But those who know the ritual, when you see these trials and you're going through that rough and rugged road, stuff like that, you see that rough and rugged road represents earth. Then just by the penalties of your obligation, when you start looking at the penalties of your obligation, you start seeing that these things are talking about the spiritual side of you, and these elements are talking about different parts of you. And you are initiating yourself into understanding these different parts of yourself. And earlier this week, I was reading the Liturgy of Morals and Dogma, Liturgy of the Blue Degrees of the Scottish Rite. And for some reason, the York Rite doesn't mention these types of trials inside of the first degree. However, in Pike's rendition of it, he mentions these trials and he talks about these trials. And, when you start looking at the Eleusinian mysteries and you start looking at all these different mysteries back in the day, they had all of these different trials a part of their initiatic process. It was testing your metal, and, to be tried by Earth, it was, it was putting you in that environment to see how you would survive, how that natural man would come forth, how you are, your base metal, and how how you derive and how you strive. Then when you were tried by fire, it was trying your heart, it was trying your emotions, it was trying your feelings, it was trying those things that give you that passion in life, and that, what makes you you. Then being tried by wind, they were testing your mind. And I'm not going to go into any degree or any house, but some places says, we done enough to tax your body, but now we're going to tax your mind. And those who've been there, they know exactly what I'm talking about. So that being said, you you're gonna be tested by these things all through masonry, all through the degrees, and then to be tried by water. And those know the story about John the Baptist. What did he do? He baptized people by water. He baptized Jesus or Yeshua ben Joseph, or but um, if whether it be real or myth, his whole purpose was to baptize with water. And then Joshua ben Joseph, he came back and he baptized people by fire, and fire by the Holy Spirit. Does that make sense to some people? If you know your book, you know exactly where I'm going with this. So it's that fire and water. Those two things right there are always tested in every Masonic degree. I don't care which house you in, you always gonna be tested by fire and water. You gotta look at it. You gotta understand your ritual, and you gotta find out where these things are. And everybody thinks initiation is only for the first degree. They all, oh, I've been IPR'd, I've been entered, passed, and raised. Yeah, you've been initiated, you've been passed, and you've been raised to the sublime degree of a master mason. However, the initiation process, as I said before, goes on throughout life, every day, every moment, every second. You got to initiate yourself, and you got to try yourself by all of these different things. You got to control your natural self, because every day, Earth, they say some people that comes with stubborn minds and things like that. And you, to be tried by that, to be tried by natural Earth, you got to control your stubbornness. You got to control yourself in each moment. And when you're dealing with your family, your friends, people you deal with on a day-to-day basis. So each time you get challenged by something like that, you initiating a new process to deal with that particular situation. Now, some situations may be the same or similar, but your reaction is always going to be different because you at a different phase in your life. So you initiate that moment differently. And the same thing with your emotions, the same thing with your thought process, the same thing with your vital energy. And that vital man is like, okay, a couple people know I'm big in the tarot, and my favorite tarot card is Indecision, where you got the beautiful woman over here, and then you got the heroine over here, or that lady. And so you got to make that choice. And when you look at that vital energy and your water, how are you going to use your water? Are you going to use it in a productive way, or are you going to use it in a negative way, or are you going to use it in a lustful way, going after those lustful things? Yeah, we men, we like things and we like looking at it. I can't lie, I'm one. So with that being said, but you have to learn how to control that energy. And these are different trials that we have to go through. These are the ordeals that we have to examine, and examine our morality within us. Emblems of morality, illustrated by symbols, things like that. But these are things we have to examine ourselves with daily, moment to moment. And I could go into more detail, but the more detail I go into, the higher the houses go. But before I leave this slide, I want to touch on fire and water. I don't know what lodges do now, but back in the day when you were an apprentice, we had a trial. When I came through, we had a trial by fire and water. and it wasn't nothing major, but I always think about it when it comes to fire and water. It's like, they're like, oh, you said you will not write, print, paint, stamp, stain, blah, 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 blah. And then they say, oh, but you did. How are we going to get rid of this piece of paper? And somebody say, burn it out. Then somebody say, wash it out. Then they say, how I got an idea. We'll burn it and wash it out. And that thing stuck in my head forever. And every time I start seeing fire and water and the symbology behind it, it's always talking about controlling those two things, your passion and your vital energy. So with that being said, I leave this with that note. We always need to learn how to subdue our passions so we can improve ourselves in masonry. So subduing those passions is always going to be with your fire and water, those two things right there, and to improve yourself in masonry. And most people think masonry is this lodge or this thing we call a lodge, but masonry is a way of life, and it's an initiatic process that 99% of masons, except those 1% like us who gonna get it, that it is a process of renewing ourselves through our spirit. All right. The need for initiation. Rite of passage rituals date back to the earliest recorded history, but were first presented as critical and universal culture process. The need for initiation deals with the rites of passage for young, guiding adolescents to become more conscious about their irrevocable transition from childhood to adulthood. Adults can give young people tools for dealing with all of the life's transitions and farewells, meeting this need for initiation often involves ceremonies with parents and faculty that welcome them into the community of adults by Rachel Keller. Yeah, and this sums up what I was saying about rites of passage. But when we look at the need for initiation, I take it back to growing up where I grew up in North St. Louis, where you got young adolescent kids that are looking for that guidance that sometimes if you don't have a big brother or you come from a single house, you got gangs that are out there trying to grab people and snatch them up for all the wrong things. But then on the flip side of the coin, you got the Knights of Pythagoras and the DMLA grabbing youth up as well for the right thing, for the betterment of these young men. And I think it deals with just a feeling of belonging, and not just belonging to anything, but something that stands for a purpose, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent. People want to feel initiated. They want to feel involved. They want to belong to something, and they want to be with people with like minds. And the thing is that if you don't get with the right minds, you get initiated into the wrong elements that turns around and could be detrimental to you, your family, and to society as a whole. Then, and particularly us um, black men and black youths, we've been hit the hardest in America when it comes to finding that right pull towards us. And I don't know when it started, but the earliest I can recollect due to my age and my experience, I can only go back to the 60s. And I'm not even that old, but I know after the civil rights movement, they tried to shun everything that we did by putting drugs into the community. And that was the downward spiral for our communities, then trying to tear a black man from a black woman and trying to destroy our household. I don't want to go too far off a subject, but yeah, that's something that's near and dear to me. But getting back to initiation, I think we want that strength of a group gathering to be around like minds so we can come together as a community and to be able to discuss things that we all like as individuals. And initiation and initiatic rites gives us that, more particularly in Freemasonry. And dealing with initiation and Freemasonry, most people think that they want to do it for community service, they want to do it for this, and they want to do it for that. Yeah, that's their individual choice. But for me, when I look at the need for initiation in Freemasonry, most people come into Freemasonry of their own free will and accord, and they come looking for knowledge. And the need for initiation, we want to be initiated into a certain knowledge or a certain understanding. Some of us want to understand ourselves. Some of us want to understand the community around us. Some of us just want to understand what makes the world tick and what makes the grass grow. But there's always a need for initiation. And what type of initiation, it's up to the individual. Hold on, my screen froze. Oh, sorry, that's the last slide. But those were the main things I wanted to talk about to set the scene for our discussion tonight. And I just want to hear what you guys' views and thoughts are on initiation. So I'm gonna stop sharing now.
So I have a question. I noticed you went that you use air wind instead of air. What is the difference?
There is no difference between wind and air. Sorry about that. It's 8:40. I use wind because, to me, wind it's fluid. I mean, air is fluid, but wind is a fluid motion to me, because you can hear wind, you can feel wind, but air is always around you. You breathe in air, and when I look at wind, like I said, it's that motion that guides us. We can, it's that feeling of it blowing on our face. It's the sound that it makes when it passes through our ears. It's like grabbing a seashell off of the ground and putting it up to your ear, and then you hearing the wind funneling through it. And to me, wind is more powerful than air, although they are the same. Brother, how's your mouth moving? But we can't hear you.
Yeah. He's trying to see if we can read lips tonight.
Yeah. Man, Brother Coney said pneuma. Yeah, I've heard that before. I can't remember the exact definition of it, but I've read it and I've seen it in multiple books.
Yeah, pneuma is the Greek. When you see Holy Ghost, when you see ghosts in the New Testament, that alludes to pneuma. I know. I wish Brother House's audio was on, because he was talking about that the other day in the Hebrew when it talks about ruach and nefs, right? When they talk about spirit and soul, they're really talking about wind and breath. Right. And then when they carried that over to the New Testament, you see pneuma, and pneuma has to deal with, when we say you have an infection of your lungs, we call it what? Pneumonia. Yeah. So spirit and soul always meant wind and breath to the ancients. In the day and time that we live in now, if you get 100 people in a room and you ask them, what do they mean about spirit and soul? We probably have 100 different definitions.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Brother House screen froze now.
Yeah, it sure did.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was an excellent presentation. One of the things that I think you hit home really good was to be able to convey that initiation isn't just something you do, like you walk in, you get initiated, and I'm done. I got initiated. You actually captured that initiation is an experience. It's a process. I look at it as a circular thing. When you started with death, birth, life, but then we're going right back around death, birth, life. This is just in all aspects of life, you see the initiatic experience. I can imagine the ancients way back in the day when they didn't have big screen TVs and DVDs, they just watched nature. And at some point, they saw the initiatic experience in nature. You know, as the sun, you know, the sun is born. It gets to its highest point. Then it takes a fall and then it dies. And then it starts all over again. So at some point, they saw that, they captured it, and they brought it down to where it was more operative in their lives. You know, but real good job of hitting that home, though.
Yeah.
And for me, it's so many different ways I can take it. I had to tell you, I'm like, my brain is like super ADD. I got 1,000 things that I want to say, but only one mouth to put it out.
Right. Yeah, I hear you.
And then when I'm trying to, you know, it's like you can prepare for these things and you can say, you know, you can have a game plan, but, you know, I prefer to be unscripted. So it's like I got my notes here. I know what I want to say, but I'm like, man, I'm gonna just say it. And but you know, we walk these walks of life, these different paths that each one of us go through. And then like I say, I see initiation every moment. When I wake up, you know, that first breath you take it's an initiation into a new day. And every second, you don't know what's going to come at you. You don't know at all. We can predict, we can forecast, we can try to do whatever. But that experience that you go through is going to initiate into something that's either going to be a positive reaction or a negative reaction. And you know, it's that transition on that mosaic pavement that we go through on a day-to-day basis. You know, we circumscribe or we, you know, go around the lodge, you know, and you know, it's our day-to-day motions, because if you look at it, we doing the same thing. Instead of just going around in the lodge, we going to work, home, back to work, home, pick up the kids, school, this, that, and the other. We're doing it all over and over again. We're doing the same things, but we're doing it in different ways at each time. And those different ways, you know, we may feel the same, but we're not the same. We're having different thoughts going through our head. We even have different music playing in our head. I mean, and when you look at, when I was talking about those 4 different men or 4 different bodies, music comes through us through the ears, is vibratory action through the ear, is waves, those signals trigger certain things, trigger certain emotions, and trigger certain men inside of us. Some of them make us angry. Some of them make us happy. Some of us make us want to go make love, you know? So, you know, those feelings that we have, those 4 different earth, fire, wind, and water, those are 4 different things that we are always challenged with at every given moment, at every time. And it's cyclical. And we just have to know when to use it and when not to use it. And because sometimes it can get us in trouble and sometimes it doesn't. And we have to bring it in a balance and equilibrium. And unfortunately, in today's society, I don't think too many men know how to bring that stuff into balance. And I'm not going to lie. It took me a long time to try to figure out an inkling of how to try to control it. And, you know, sometimes you can't, but that's the thing. That's the beauty about masonry and life. It's a continuous process. So if you fall, pick yourself back up and then try not to do it again. But, you know, you just got to keep testing your metal and finding those cracks and kinks and then fixing it.
I got a question just to throw out on the floor for us to ponder a little bit. Can an individual go through an initiatory process but not be initiated?
Yes.
I believe so. You're basically just going through emotions.
There you go. Yeah.
For most of the degrees in masonry, brothers just going through the motions, and if they never go back and reflect on it, they don't really get too much out of it. What was meant to be, they never get. So that's what I think about that.
And that was what I was trying to bring out right there is just because you've been through an initiatory process doesn't mean you opened yourself up for that renewal or that transformation, because that's what that initiatory experience is. Something dies to be born again, right? And then to live and die again. But if you didn't, and I think that's why Masonry says you come on your own free will and accord, right? Because you got to be willing to go through that transformation. And as the brother said earlier, I've seen a lot of brothers just come through the motions. They get initiated, but there's no transformation that takes place. And, you know, it would be really nice to have something like this for all new brothers that come through, to explain to them what initiation is beforehand, right? It took me a little while of being in Masonry before I really understood what initiation was. I felt like I've been initiated. I'm a Mason now. But I really wasn't in the beginning. I had just went through a process. No transformation had taken place at all.
Right. And I think the transition comes from studying, learning the craft, learning different things, and then applying it to your daily life. And when you do that, that's when it starts sinking in. Then you say, hold on, I just went through a process. I wasn't really initiated.
Yeah.
And then that's when you actually get initiated.
Yes.
That's when the initiation starts, when you recognize that you ain't really did anything except go through the motions.
That's it. Yeah.
And then I would concur with you, brothers, in regards to that initiatic stage, is once you embrace, as you're saying, Brother Williams, once you embrace that process, you go all in, like Brother Watson stated, then there becomes that renewal of the mind. Because once, you renew your mind, your whole thought process, and more importantly, your perception, because things start to change. Because, as we all went through our initiation, you notice when you really embraced it, your whole perception changed about how you viewed the world and everything around you. You started noticing signs and symbols just in everyday. You hear certain language, you kind of look real quick, like not knowing that they're not in the craft, but then you just start picking up on different language and verbiage, and your whole mind, your whole thought process just goes back to that. And as you were stating, Brother Williams, it's a way of life from that point, because you've been transformed. So now how's that? We always say you got to walk the talk. So if you're, talking as a Master Mason, then you are engaged and you've embraced that. It's like a ritual. It's a lifestyle now. It's a whole different lifestyle now. So now, you're going to talk about it, then you got to be about it and walk that walk. And then as was on earlier, one of our group meets, it's kind of like then people now know you by your point of entrance.
Right. Your perfect point of entry.
Yeah.
Based off of your actions.
Yeah. I know, and we got any other veterans in here besides me and Brother Watson?
I serve, sir.
Oh, okay, so you serve too. So when you it's certain things. If you re-enlisted, you raise your right hand, and then how you raise your right hand, then how you put, certain things like certain things like that. Then, Robert, Brother House, we can hear you.
He is.
Oh yeah, there you go. There we go.
Then drilling ceremonies, stuff like that, how we step off, marching technique, left flank march, and then all those certain movements, then the certain things you say when you re-enlist. And then I retired a CW4 warrant officer in the Army, and every time I got promoted, we had to say the oath of office. Man, I swear, I was like, man, oh man, this sounds like I'm doing a Master Mason degree all over again.
and going through your training is an initiatory process. I've seen a lot of men come into boot camp. Some of them out of shape. Yeah, some of them come in out of shape. Some of them come in mentally out of shape. By the time you graduate a couple months later, it's a lot of folks that are just not the same person. I wasn't. I came in, I was a knucklehead. Yeah, I was on probation in 2 counties. Got into the military and ran into some drill sergeants that knew how to deal with brothers like me.
Yeah, you had to get smoked a couple times.
Yeah, they dealt with me. I thought I was tough, but those drill sergeants, they knew how to deal with me.
Yeah,
And
I was the same way.
Yeah.
I was the exact same way. I came in knucklehead, and like I said, I grew up rough. And although my father was there, I grew up in a single household. My mom was something to be desired. My father, he was a great guy for the most part, but at the same time, I had those influence people trying to get me out there to do bad things because I had, I'll be honest, my brother passed away in about almost 2 years ago, and my brother was a notorious gang affiliate. He wasn't in a gang, but he was affiliated with gang activities, and he essentially, he did. He was a hitman. So
okay.
I'll leave it at that. So, and he got paid for it. So, and he ended up doing almost 30 years in jail, and he died. He got out and died a year later.
Wow.
And, growing up around that type of environment, people were expecting me to step up and take my brother's role. And I'm just like, I can't do this. And I always looked at these gangs and these people trying to initiate people into gangs to do things like that. And I'm like, this ain't my life. And I joined the army, and I joined the army to get away from that, because even though my father was there, the streets were there more than my father was. So
I thought that was interesting when you brought that up earlier about gangs. A lot of people miss that because there is an initiatory experience or process that young men go through when they join gangs, and it's a culture,
Right.
Yeah, I was going to mention, as far as the initiation process, could it be possible that part of the problem is that there's no preparation before brothers are getting initiated? So they're not coming in, they might not be mentally ready to accept it, or physically in any type of way. There's no prep. There needs to be some type of preparation before initiation.
Right.
Reminds me of Chamber of Reflection.
Right. I was
That's
about
what
to get to
comes
that. And that's what the Scottish Rite, in the Scottish Rite, and in their, before you even get your entered apprentice, you already going through the Chamber of Reflection.
That's
and
beautiful.
You were being tried by the 4 elements prior to you even knocking on that dang on chamber door.
That's
so
beautiful.
I'm like, man, how are they doing that? And this is the 1800s. I'm like, so you got to be, I got a book that breaks down all of this stuff. I got to go look in my library. I actually got the physical book, and it said how they did the degrees in the Scottish Rite on, did that prep work prior to doing the actual degree, where it was like, hey, use this material to make it feel like fire, use this material to make it feel like the earth is shaking, use this material. Wow. I was just like, whoa, man. I was like, man, if I could do this right now.
Bro, well, I was blessed to go through this Spring Council, Louisiana, before I came to Prince Hall. So I went through all that stuff before.
Really?
Yeah, when I first came into Freemasonry in 2000, I went through Spring Council, Louisiana. So there's all Scottish Rite degrees. So like you said, the first thing you encounter is the Chamber of Reflection. And then you go, just like you said, it's funny because they say it's part of initiation, but all that they're going through the elements is actually prep work. When you read the ritual, it says that it starts after all that. And that's the initiation. Most of the brothers don't ever read that far to see that the initiation didn't start until you went through all the elements and everything like that. Right. So, and another thing that was, when you mentioned, Mike, about having that piece of paper, that's something else we did over there in Louisiana too. Now, the only thing is they explained to it, I ain't never thought about, but we did burn it at the end. What they did was they had us sign a blank piece of paper, and then later on, it was like a little joke or whatever. But they'd be like, "Oh, you signed it," and they have brothers come around and they'll put, you owe us a car, you owe us this, you owe us that. And later on, they were like, "Well, you signed this," and you'd be like, "Well, that was a lesson to teach you never sign a blank document or something you don't understand." They left it there, and then we did burn it. But I ain't ever think about, like you were saying, the fire and the water of burning the actual paper which you took. I ain't never took it that
I know you were really careful on not divulging too much, right, earlier, but I can tell you it was like a eureka moment. The first time I looked through the ritual and I saw those elements. I just flipped out. I was like, man, how do you? And the thing is you can read these things, but until you get to a certain level of awareness of consciousness, you won't even see it.
Well, yeah, you won't. When you start looking at, okay, you got the penalties of your obligation, and when you look at the penalties of your obligation, one of them, it's restricting the airflow. The other one, it's in the center of your chest cavity, and then that center of your chest cavity, that's where all your vital organs are in your heart, and it's pumping that blood and that fire, that passion that goes through your body. And then you got your actually, let me rephrase that.
Yeah, you forgot one.
Let me rephrase that. That particular area right there. What is blood? Blood is liquid. Blood is water. Things like that, and that's what we are made of.
Right.
It's 70%. 70% water.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I don't want to go into higher degrees, but when you start looking at stuff and start talking about the blood, you start like, hold on, wait. Then you start talking about the 72 names of God, and then you like the 72 names of God. Then I'm like, so what is blood and what is sperm? How many drops of sperm does it take to make? How many drops of blood does it take to make one sperm? 72 drops of blood to make one sperm. Then one sperm has 5 gigs of data inside of it. 5 gigs of data inside of one drop of
download.
It's a download.
That's
and
a download.
Then when you start doing the math of how much we produce on a daily basis, we produce millions of data that we waste on things that are irrelevant. And then you tie that back in a full circle in the masonry, you learn how to subdue those passions. And then that goes back to that vital energy, that lower energy. And that's where the other water is, that second water, that, that other penalty or obligation, where, that lower part is served, and then, bowels pull within and stuff. But what are your bowels and all of your stomach? Everything there is a furnace. That's where that heat comes from. It's where
a lot of people don't think what that's really alluding to, because you have those wheels that we call chakras that are the main center points of the body that's actually been attacked. And if you don't have those main center points, then you can't get to a level of enlightenment.
Correct.
So, yeah.
That's good. That's good.
Hey, Brother House, you had dropped out earlier. Would you be
trying to say something?
Yeah, could you be so kind as to touch on just a little bit on the? I was talking about nefs and roof and inside of the Hebrew. Yeah, can you touch on that just a little bit for us? Because someone that brought up the Greek rendition of it, which was pneuma, and I told him I think that's a subject that you're pretty sharp on.
Well, one of the things is I can't remember which brother asked about why he used air versus why he used wind versus air. And the thing is, if we go back to Kemet, we know that the symbol or the hieroglyph for the neter was the flag. And that flag was moving because wind was blowing on it. Now, we have to understand that air itself does not have any type of motion. Like right now, I'm sitting in my car, there's no air moving. there's no wind. So I know I'm breathing in air, but to actually know that something is there, a force, a being, or a spirit, it has to have some type of movement to it, and that's where the wind comes in. So it was actually better for him to use wind versus air, because in Genesis chapter 2, when God breathed into Adam the breath of life, the ruach, that was actually wind that was being blown into him, not air. So when we understand what the ruach is, and that wind that blows against us lets us know that that being is present. And so to just use air is not really giving the necessary realization of what the Holy Spirit or the Holy Breath or the Ruach HaKodesh means, or what it is. So that's one of the main reasons why we fly flags now. You know, people don't understand why we have an American flag or this or that. It's really to actually show the power that is actually pushing and blowing that flag. Everybody focuses on the flag versus what is actually moving the flag. And that's the thing, and that's why the netter, the hieroglyph, is a symbol of a flag, and the wind is actually blowing it. That lets you know that God is there, and that symbol is always showing the flag in a motion type of manner. So it's letting you know that God is always there, always has been, always will be, and is to come.
Okay, I'm
we
gonna
see
ask
a
you
lot
one
of those
question.
flags surrounding the camp in the Scottish Rite.
I was about to put that on there. I was about to say, hey,
I knew you were going there.
hey, so you know, that's in the Scottish Rite group on Facebook. You gonna put that on that Camp Friday?
Exactly.
You need to put that on there.
Go ahead, House. That's you, man. You hit that
That's
home.
you all day.
Yeah, you hit that home, man.
And when you say that too, when you did the air versus the wind, I'm thinking of, now I'm going to rhetoric, language. You have your passive and your active. The air would, the language would be passive, and as you alluded, brother, the wind is now it's active, whereas the air is passive.
Right.
Because now you have that motion and then that movement, as you stated, brother, as to seeing the Almighty Himself is active.
And see,
you feel His presence through the air, through the movement of just everyday living. Yeah, we breathe in air, but when you see that wind blowing, like you said with them flags,
right?
Then you feel His presence. Sometimes, like when you're out there in that desert, you know, that warm wind come through, you feel that.
Oh yeah, you get off that plane in Kuwait. That well, it ain't the air that sucked the life out of you. It's that wind, that desert heat.
See, and that's one of the things people don't understand, how the Hebrew language, which we know is actually a Phoenician Canaanite language, that many words, the Hebrew language, borrowed from the ancient Egyptians. But we understand that the concepts behind the name itself that we call Jehovah, which also has been used as Yahweh, which all Jewish people, religious Jewish people, know the proper pronunciation of that word, which I'm not going to say. But the thing is the meaning of that word. The word itself is not a noun. It's not a name. It is actually a verb. And that goes back to that flag and the activity, because God is always active. It's a verb. And the 4-letter tetragrammaton is telling you that it causes to exist. So at all times, it is always causing everything to exist. And that's why our breath is most important, because we're all going to exhale one last time. So every time we inhale, that is the grace. That is the gift of life. That is the actual symbolic understanding of what God did to Adam in the beginning, breathing into him. So Adam actually was inhaling as God was exhaling. So there's the contract and the restriction. There's the ebb and the flow. There's us giving and receiving. We are receiving the Holy Spirit every time we inhale, because the Holy Spirit is ruach, which the proper translation is air or wind. So when we actually inhale, we're literally inhaling the breath of God every time.
And that's what makes us all conscious. If you really think about it, if we was to all hold our breath right now, we would lose what? Lose conscious.
That's
so
right.
all of that's tied to the being conscious.
Right. I used to get in trouble when I was younger. My favorite thing was somebody's like, "Oh man, you don't believe in nothing." You know, I'm like, I do believe, but you want me to believe in something the way you want me to believe it, not the way I believe it. And then they say, God don't like that. I say, God only want me to breathe, because if I can't breathe, I can't believe. So,
yeah.
So at the end of the day, that's all God needs for me to do, because if I'm breathing, I'm believing.
I know we
That's
talked
right.
about this the other day about God being omnipresent. And you hit it home just a minute ago when you said that, you know, God's name, God wouldn't even have a name. A name alludes to it being a noun, which is a person, place, or thing. So God could not be all, right, omnipresent everywhere if he was just a person or in a certain place or was a certain thing, right? So you hit it home when you said it was a verb, and later on we turned it into a noun. It was just God is always that I am that I am. What is God? God is that. And what else? God is that too. And God is it's just an action that just keeps going on and on and on, has no beginning and has no end.
And see,
and it's trying to hit a moving target. You won't ever do it.
When we go into that word, the biggest problem is translation. Has a lot of people lost in translation. The phrase "I am that I am" does not exist in Hebrew, because there is no present tense verbs in Hebrew. So the word "am" cannot exist in Hebrew, because that word doesn't exist. So the proper translation of Eye Asha Eye is "I will be that I will be," letting you know that it is active. It is constantly moving. And
like the wind.
I know, right. And I know Mike was having a discussion in one of the groups where the guy was like, can God evolve? Well, God is always evolving, because
that was me that said that.
Right. It is. God is always moving. It is always in an active fashion. And we see from science, in a way, says that the universe is expanding. Well, if the universe is expanding and God encompasses all, that means God is moving. And that means that it's expanding. That means it is evolving. And that's what a lot of people fail to understand and see. If people actually learn the languages in which these translations come from, then they would get a vastly better understanding of what the Yod Hey Wav Hey actually represents and what does it mean. Because if you know it is a verb, then you know that a God with a noun for a name is now limited to that noun, because that noun now makes it stationary. It is.
Would you say that would be just a substitute?
Well, see,
you know where I'm going with that one, right? Yeah. Sometimes we need just a substitute until we grow up a little bit, right?
Right. Because
That's good.
as we saw in the group, a lot of people are not quite ready to receive a certain level of truth. One of the guys mentioned, well, God can't be feminine or God is masculine. Well, if it tells you that it created male and female in its own image, then the image of God has to be both masculine and feminine. There's no way around that. It says God created he, them, male and female created he, them. So that tells you that God is all encompassing. Everything is
The
within
rebus.
God. Right.
Even the things that we can't think of. Like there's certain
Exactly.
things that God is that are ineffable. We just don't understand it. We don't even know we don't know that part of God.
Right.
Right.
It's levels of conscious that we can explore. That's like animals and stuff being able to see things that we can't see, and
Yes.
feel things that we can't feel. It's that level of consciousness that's inside of that animal. Some people think animals are dumb beings or dumb things. I'm like, man, have you ever seen a cat? Have you grown up with a cat around you? Them things are geniuses. And it's certain energies and certain things that they see that we can't see. Same thing with bats and sonar, heat, body heat sense and things like that. We're creating machines to do what animals do naturally. And
Right.
we only have a color perception that we can see with our physical eye, but there may be another vast amount of colors out there that our consciousness cannot fathom or even put it into thought, because this feeble body that we're in, we're only here to learn this part of creation, not all of creation. It won't unfold to us until we're properly initiated into that level.
See, and that's a key point you hit on, because we know that the light spectrum is very vast, but we're only able to see roughly 0.8% of the total light spectrum. So we're operating in a whole vastness of things that we don't even know is there. And when we think about space, say I'm standing before a wall, and this what we call area in between me and the wall is space, and it's empty. Well, scientifically, we know based on the light spectrum itself, it's not empty. It's full of a lot of different things, and that's
Particles,
where you get right, and that's
bacteria.
Yeah.
These levels of spirits and angels and things of this nature, because they're there. We may not be able to perceive it on the level of light spectrum that they are at, but they're there. And depending on what may happen to you, you might have a near-death experience or whatever, and you see something that you didn't see prior to that experience, but that thing has always been there. It was just because we wasn't able to perceive that particular light spectrum.
That's right.
You weren't able to tune into that. I remember the first time I found out that we actually don't see anything. We are receiving light. And so like right now, I used to have a little joke I say to people. I said, you've never seen me in real time.
No.
Because light hits me, reflects off me, then you catch that light in your eyes, and then your mind tells you exactly what you saw outside of there. But this is all behind. So we never really see each other in real time.
Right. And Brother Greenway just hit on a key part. He hit on a key part is a vibration. Everything sounds, everything works off of vibration. Our senses and our eyes to be able to see, it's actually a motion. It's the vibratory motion that makes the light spectrum hit the retina, and the retina to all the other all the other functions. And optic nerve. And, it's a wave. And then space, time, everything is a wave. It's always moving like that. All our atoms are moving on waves, and it's a particular frequency that is making our atoms stick together. And I believe that when we die or physically die, is that our frequency changes, and then it's either disrupted to a level where it changes to go either into a higher frequency or into a lower frequency. I don't know, because I ain't died yet. So
And one of the things that I say to people, like I'll ask you guys this question is, when it comes to light, let's say you go out in the sun, if you wanted to be warmer, would you wear darker colors or would you wear lighter colors?
You gonna wear darker colors.
There you go, darker color. So I used to ask guys when I was younger, I'd say, why would you want to lighten your eyes up? Because if you
the faster you're able to process information and you're able to remember more information. And melanin is a big storage bank of information. And that's why scientifically they've shown that melanated people, regardless if you're a Negro, if you're a Southern Indian, if you have a darker melanin, you are able to store more information within your DNA than anyone else. And that's why they're doing more tests on melanated people genetically to determine who has the ghost DNA or the ghost gene, to see who were here prior to a Homo erectus. But these things it's amazing, because I remember a few years ago they did like a ultraviolet camera type test, and white people don't know that sunscreen is liquid melanin. And when you look at it under UV light, their skin actually appears black when they put on the UV protection, because that's exactly what it is. It is liquid melanin.
Wow. And the beautiful part about it is, again, we're all Masons on here, so we're all about the human family, right?
Right.
But what's interesting about what we're talking about is we're dealing with facts, we're dealing with truth. So it's not one that I don't want, any of our viewers to think that, we're leaning towards more, this is a black type thing that we're doing. No, we're
absolutely
just talking
not.
truth. We're about the human family, about the human race, but we're also talking about what's true here, right?
Yeah, that's pure. That's biology.
Right.
That's pure biology.
Yep.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, that initiatory experience sure did take us somewhere.
Well, but I mean, when you look at it, the initiatic experience, like I said, you can put anything you think about and as a ritual, and how you initiate that ritual, brushing your teeth. I mean, anything. We just don't think about it because it's just natural reaction and stuff. Hey, I got to wake up. I got to do this. I got to go do that. And then you got to, like I said, you got to circumvent the lodge. You got to circumvent life every day.
Mike, when you were talking, the first thing came to my mind was the infamous Jesus and the mikveh. I know Robert House can probably correct me on this, but if you remember when he met with John the Baptist and was baptized, that whole experience was an initiated passing and raising of the four elements, because you had the dove, you had the water, you had John the Baptist, the fire in his bosom, and you had Jesus. So all of that was Jesus actually getting initiated, passed, and raised to do the work which he was supposed to be done. Now, what we always forget about is the rite of passage that had to happen before that. Because remember now, there's a time of span between 13 and 33 we just don't know about, supposedly. So I'm going to just leave that. But there's that time of space. There's that time of space where he had to earn that. Okay? That's what the point of the story is. When he came to that point in his life when he was ready to go out and do the work, because the point of the mikveh is to baptize you or initiate you so that you can minister to the people. That's what mikveh means, but I could be wrong, but that's what I was taught. So
yeah, the mikveh is a purification, and the mikveh is traditionally used for people that's converting into Judaism, and that's like the last step in the conversion, going to the mikveh. And what that does is it purifies you in a symbolic and a physical way through the water of removing the past you, which we call going, and bringing you into your new self, which is a Jew, or of the covenant, basically. But the thing is, you're right. That is an initiation. When you go to the mikveh, that's a ritual. When you do your bar mitzvah, that's a ritual. when you're again circumcised, and that's a ritual. A lot of people lose sight of one thing with Jesus and Lazarus. You know, the Bible tells you that it's allowed it to man to die once and then the judgment. But Lazarus was dead, but yet brought back to life. Now, one or two things is taking place here. Three things. Either the scriptures are lying, or he wasn't dead, or he's still walking around here today because he can't die again, or it actually was a ritual of taking somebody that was dead in a symbolic way of ignorance and brought to life with knowledge. And that's
I'll take
why
the last one for 25.
Right. That's exactly what was happening. Yes.
I'll take the last one.
Yeah. So,
yes.
you know, it's a lot of stuff going on in the Bible beyond that of just your mainstream religion teaches you if you actually read the book. And I think personally, and this is 100% my own opinion, as master masons, it is our duty to actually be able to go into that book and break it down to what it actually is versus what has been told to us through religion it is. Because me personally, I've read that book front to cover well over 300 times in 3 different languages. And from what's actually in the book versus what particular ministers and pastors teach you in that book, the church is only giving you 0.5% of what's actually in the book. And if we actually took the time to break that book down from chapter to chapter, verse to verse, line to line, you would be amazed of how much stuff has been missed in that book that's really telling you why you should know the truth, and the truth shall make you free.
Right. And each piece of it, I mean, when you start looking at, I mean, you can take chapter by chapter, and each chapter is a different initiation. But at the same time, it's the way I look at it is the chapters, they go chapter 1, blah, 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 chapter 2, blah, 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 chapter 3. And then all of a sudden it switches up, but it's the same initiation, but doing it in a different way.
Yeah.
Yep.
Would you say that Job went through an initiatic process?
Oh yeah, Job.
Yes.
Job went through
and then some.
And then some.
Of all time.
Yeah, that was a heck of an initiation he went through. You know?
I almost want to say he was more than initiated. He was hazed.
Yeah. There was some hazing in there.
Yeah, there was a little bit of that too. There's a little bit of that too.
Yeah. Job's the highest of initiates.
Right.
But you know what, brothers, you know what concerns me, and you'll see that as we begin to teach other, and then, you know, brothers coming into the craft, there's always this fear is that the truth is going to cause them to lose whatever they already have. Like they're not ready to let go. And what I mean by that is when you say, hey, this is something that's going to take you to another level, they feel that that's going to erase something that they knew before, and it's going to ostracize them from those that they knew. And they get in that fear causes them not to want to accept that new truth. Because a lot of times because I see on Facebook, you guys are shedding a lot of light. I mean, you're dropping a lot of bombs, but a lot of people just don't want to hear that. They don't want to come to that because it's like, okay, well, wait a minute. This is what I believed all this time. My faith was built on this. This is what I know it to be based on experience. And now you just flipping it 180 on me, and I don't want to take that because I'm going to lose everything I have because I'm believing something else. So it's like that letting go, that fear will cause them not to believe.
Well, see,
I'll go ahead.
I would say, well, that goes into picking up your cross. And a lot of people are not prepared and ready to pick up their cross and do that sacrifice that's needed to be enlightened to go to that next step. Everybody says they want to be Christ-like, but they're not willing to do the things that Christ did.
Now, hold on, wait a minute. I got to say something. Hey, Brother Williams, you sure you didn't bring him through? You sure you didn't dub him the last couple of days, man? He's sounding like a Sir Knight to me. Something you don't hear about. I thought you hadn't went through the commandery yet. You know what I mean?
Well, and see, that's what and that's why I said what I said the other day. I say, man, he sounds just like a Sir Knight. I don't know. I'm like, and shoot, maybe I have to get my sword out of my closet and make a trip down to Alabama.
And he might be honorary.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But getting back to it is just like you said on Facebook. These guys, they say they about it, but then when you show them something, it's not to go against what they believe, but to show them that what you're saying and what you believe is more to the story, and they don't want to. They only want that little piece that they got the comprehension of. Great. If you only got a comprehension of a little bit, get with somebody who's going to explain it to you and help you empower yourself. It's not going to change who you are. It's going to help you. Because when I came into Masonry, I was looking for all different types of things to try to figure out why the Quran says this, why the Bible says this, why the Bhagavad Gita says this. What ties it together? And fortunately, when I became a Scottish Rite Mason, that's when everything started coming into play, and I started seeing it. And then I started reading and started getting deeper into the Kabbalah and trying to understand the Kabbalah, because I'm like, every book I keep picking up kept saying Kabbalah this, Kabbalah that. I'm like, okay. Then I got Secret Teachings of All Ages, and I got this picture with this huge Kabbalah tree in there, and Manly P. Hall's talking about it. I'm like, so what's this thing about? Then when I start I start looking at things I'm like, okay, what does this Kabbalistically mean? What does that say? Then taking that, then start tying it together, and the stories from every country, every nation start making more sense to me. And then it started becoming, and at that point, I don't know if I ever had a religion, but more spiritual. I want to say like I said, I'm a spiritual deist, because I was like, I can see all of these different elements from all these different religions. And, me and my wife traveling everywhere, going to these different countries and seeing all these different things. Then my military travel, going to different countries with different people and seeing this chain of union, and that one bond, and that bond is the spirit. And when we look at that spirit versus, we look at spirit and spirituality versus religion and what a man says, you see that connection between every human being on the planet versus, I can't talk to them because he's a Muslim. I can't talk to him because he's Jewish. I can't talk. I'm like, man, well, you go to our Prince Hall Esoteric forum on Facebook, or not Facebook, but GroupMe. You go in there, you're going to see every religion, and you're going to have every different personality, and we all gelling.
And you don't really see anyone arguing either,
And that's the whole thing, though. Is like you said, Brother Williams, is the minute you separate religion from spirituality, and you all good. Because then, hey, I never question a man of his faith or his spirituality. Now, I may be up to discuss belief, but I'll never question a man in his faith and his spirituality, because that's exactly what it is. Because it's his faith is his rule to his guide, as we all, hey, when you came, we all came through. We all know in that first degree, that is your rule and your guide. So, so mote it be. And then from a spiritual aspect, I think I've put this out there once before in one of our groups, Brother Mike, is I often ask myself, am I a spiritual being having a human experience? Or am I a human being having a spiritual experience?
Right.
I'll take the first one.
I'm just in a human form,
Yeah.
I think a lot of times when I initiate brothers, I always ask them, you know, you believe in God. I don't ask them how they believe in God. I don't ask them where they're coming from. Do you believe in God? That entity right there. Because how you want to believe in that, we'll get to that later. Know that there's a higher power that's guiding everything, and all source and energy comes from that. And then we'll get into the deeper stuff later. Because a lot of times, you know, if you want to believe it from a Buddha perspective, a Quran perspective, a Bible Christian perspective, don't matter. At the end of the day, it's still a God. I don't know what you call him. And that's how I always come at it with, it don't matter. So,
and see, that's the biggest thing is ultimately the thing that separates us all is language. And that's what the gate of God or the Tower of Babel was explaining. When we were of one language, we were together.
That's right.
When we had the languages split, then the people separated. And then that's when the bickering and all that stuff came together. And that's the problem. You have people right now that are Christians that will say, well, Muslims pray to a different God. Well, Allah is just Arabic for God. It's not a separate God. It's just their language for the word God. And that's why Jews do not look at Arabs or Muslims as idol worshipers, because they know that Allah just literally means God. So the biggest issue is language. We as Masons, we know regardless if you're a Black Mason, a White Mason, Asian Mason, a Native American Mason, we speak the same language.
That's right.
Because we know the third degree, this is that. We know the second degree, this is that. We're going to be able to come together and speak the same language, and that's what ultimately keeps us on the level, the language.
There you go.
Going back to what the brother was saying earlier, I would almost say, and we can see the results of this, I would almost say that a person who is unwilling to change is going against the laws of nature. The initiatic experience itself says that there's death, there's birth, there's life, and this thing is cyclic. And if you look at nature, there's one thing that's ubiquitous within nature, and that's change. So going back to what you were saying before, when a person says, I'm going to hold on to this and I'm not going to let it go, you're going against the laws and processes of nature. Life itself is an initiatic experience. You can't fight that. When you do, the law of karma plays in your life when you start to go against the laws of nature.
That's right.
There you go. So I guess you could almost say to anybody coming in, are you willing to die? Because that's what's going to happen. Are you willing to die today? Because literally you do die. I mean, you rebirth with a whole different mindset. That's why. And cats get scared about that. Like, die for what? I'm about to, whoa, what are we doing? Like, hey, this is about to happen.
And what gets me is that I often ask people to look at it like this. Let's say, I'll be 50 this year. So say I've been on the planet for 50 years. I know more about not being alive than or put it this way, I should know more about death than I know about life, because where was I at 300 years ago? Where was I at 400 years ago? So I have more experience outside of this body than I have in this body. So death is not something foreign to us, right? It really isn't. I could say that we've spent more time in death than we have in life.
Yeah,
no question.
And
No
you still dead while you're living.
Yeah.
Kind of like in a zombie state, right?
Yeah.
Because, we got a lot of us that's in the valley of the dry bones.
And so many people want to hold on to this little small fraction of all of existence. When you look at the grand scheme of things and how, they say the universe is billions of years old, then I'm like, man, you sitting up here, you fighting over a crumb?
Right.
And when you go back to it, I was watching a gentleman talking about biology the other day, and it was a couple months back, and he made a real important statement. He was saying that human beings here on this planet, right? We tend to think because we got intelligence and we're building and all that stuff that we're something really great on the planet Earth. But he said, if you wear a tie to work, he He says, take your tie. And he says, take your hand and stick it all the way out. He says, this is the beginning of the planet Earth. And he said, go all the way to the end of your fingernails. He said, take a fingernail file and swipe across your fingernail one time. He said, you just knocked out the entire human race off the planet Earth. Basically, when I saw that, I said, man, that's how relevant we are to the planet Earth. But think about how relevant we would be when you're looking at, as Brother Wynn was saying, as the entire universe or the entire span of the universe.
See, I think the biggest problem is this. We are too individualized. And when I say we're too individualized, I mean it in this way. If we're on this earth, inside this earth, and this earth is inside the Milky Way galaxy, and the Milky Way galaxy is within this universe, ultimately, we are the universe. Yes. Because we cannot separate ourselves from what we are contained in. That is just like saying, you hear a lot of people say, well, I'm in the body of Christ. Well, everybody wasn't called to be the head of Christ. Some people are called to be the hand, the heart, the stomach. All of these things are part of the one. It is a whole. It is a unit. Just like my stomach. I can't say my stomach is just my stomach. My stomach is a part of me. So if we understand that we are all a part of this whole, this unity, this unit, then everything else would actually make more sense. We'll know that tree is not a tree for itself. That tree is a tree for us. That tree releases oxygen. We release carbon dioxide. We both give each other life.
I'm going to get Brother Williams fired up in a minute.
That is the issue. We are too separated in a scheme of things where we're actually one. And that's our highest prayer is the Shema. It comes from Deuteronomy 6:4. Shema Yisrael, Adonai, Eloheinu, Adonai Akkad. Akkad is translated in your KJV as one. What Akkad actually means unity. It is telling you that we're all a part of this one. And that goes back to God being all-encompassing. We are all within God. We are a fashion of God. So ultimately, that means we are not separate from God. And that's why it says we're the microcosm and the macrocosm. We're all a part of one entity expressing itself through multiple avenues.
Now, doesn't that sound like the Kabbalah?
That is exactly what it is.
You know what I mean?
It's amazing because think about this. If you cut yourself, your body naturally starts to bleed and then it starts to heal itself. You consciously are not telling your arm to heal itself, but yet it's doing it.
That coagulation process. Going into alchemy. Somebody mentioned alchemy earlier. Your body is a natural alchemical process.
Right. You've got thousands and thousands of trillions of microorganisms working at that moment to heal you. All of that is a part of you. You didn't have to go in there and say, hey, y'all, I need y'all to heal this area. It went to work for you. So when we understand that and we look at the scheme of things as a whole, if we understand that we're one unity, one unit working together as, say, we're little small microorganisms within God, then we can understand why Mahlon P. Hall says that we are the masters of the atoms, and the atoms are the masters of God, and God is the atoms. There's no separation.
Yeah.
Almost like a beehive lecture.
Yeah.
Boom, there it is.
But the thing is, by our human nature, we are born as selfish beings. That's why our life we're taught that we're a part of. Like we're constantly taught from kindergarten all the way up to grade school and everything else that we're a part of a bigger union, and even in religion. It's constantly inbred in us.
And all the heroes in the religious stories brung that message of love. And then love in its essence is unity, coming together.
Yes.
I often tell a story, since we're talking a little bit about biology, is, you know, someone asked me one time, like, how would Jesus know when the end of the time was coming? Remember, they asked him, they said, what will be signs? And he said, wars, rumors of wars. And he said, diverse weathers. And the question is, how would he know that? Because if you study the body, we know the body is getting ready to die when the cells in it start to attack one another, when there's wars and rumors of wars. And we call this in the body, we call it cancer, right? And if these cells continue to fight and don't start to come together and love one another, it will do what? It will end the life of the body. Now, the immune system, to me, is like the war, the diverse weathers. Because if you were a cell inside of that body, the immune system would appear to be attacking you, right? It's trying to get rid of you. So it would be diverse weathers in there. So at the end of the day, I think our journey is supposed to be us realizing that the next level is us coming together as one. And to me, it's really an illusion because we're not even separate. It's like we've lost consciousness. We are not aware that we are together. And so it appears that you and I are separate. If you took a light, let's say if you were in a gymnasium and it was dark, I just cut off the light and there was a light bulb in there. And then I put a shade over it. And then I take a pen and I start poking holes in it. And then a light comes out. What's called that light? Brother Williams. I poke another light. I call it Brother House. We poke another light and I say, that's Brother Watson. And because we poke Brother Williams first, we'll say Brother Williams is a little bit older. Now we got all of these different lights poking out of there. But in reality, there's only one light in that room.
One light source.
Yeah, if you take the shade off, which is the illusion, you see that it's just one light. And I think that, to me, every initiatic process or experience is supposed to bring us back to that reality. That we are not separate. We are all one.
And that is the understanding why he said, for me and the Father are one.
Yes.
He wasn't saying he's God. He was saying him and God are unified in one being. And that goes back to God causes to exist. We talked about this in the group. Before the embryo has a brain, the heart starts to beat.
That's correct.
What is causing the heart to beat? There's no
cells
brain.
are programmed to do that. Yeah.
Right. So something of divine nature has to be contained within that multi-cell organism to start pumping blood through those cells that's dividing before a central nervous system, before a brain, before a spinal cord, all these things. So that tells you right there, for
your
me,
consciousness is not in your head.
Right.
There you go.
Ends the whole discussion of does God exist? Because that right there in itself proves God exists, because it just turns something on and it's keeping it on. So when you think about that, like you were saying, it's all about unity. It's all about coming together and loving each other, because as he said, how can you say you love God whom you have not seen, but hate your brother who you have seen?
Or have you heard this one before? Greater love have no man than this.
As he laid down his life for his brother.
Because my life is your life. That's what we're supposed to be understanding. And all of these heroes and all these different cultures we talked about, they all brought that message. You guys need to come together, get it together, love one another.
Now, this should drive it home. It tells you to love thy neighbor as thyself. If you know thyself and the significance of yourself, and you know what this entity represents, and you know that the temple of God is you, and the Holy Spirit resides in you, that means that your neighbor also is the reflection of that same temple. So by knowing yourself, then you automatically know your neighbor as self as well.
And what was that? What was
That's
that?
how you build Jerusalem.
Yeah, what was that instrument that we used to unite the building into one common mass? Anybody knows what that thing was called?
Yeah, that's the working tool.
You know, and that's that in a brotherly love. You know, here we go. We're bringing it right back. You know,
right?
Yeah.
See, I did a lecture in my Blue House, and it was shortly after I received my 32nd degree. And I told them at the end of the lecture, I was like, look, I said, I made it to the 32nd degree, and I can tell y'all right now, it's all contained in these 3 degrees. And I understand now why they say there is no degree higher than the 3rd degree. You've just been looking through a peephole. The door is just open once you get to the 32nd degree, and you realize it goes right back to what you were saying with the light and the shade.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same light source. You just get little fractions of that light. And when you realize you had the secret the whole time, you just didn't know it.
Sound like Bruce Leroy looking for the master.
Yeah, exactly. And what got me with that is, you know, I'm one of those ones that I don't subscribe to the ideology that there's something higher than the 3rd degree. But I'll say this. I didn't understand those first 3 degrees until I got into these other degrees. You know, I'll give you that. You know, I couldn't believe how much I missed. When I start hearing these other stories and these other degrees, I went right back and I said, how did I miss that the first time? It was right there and I couldn't even see it.
Right. That's, you know, my story on the Scottish Rite. You know, I spent my first 7 years just in the lodge of perfection, because every time I would read 1 degree, I go right back down to the first and like, man, how did I miss that?
Yeah.
So, and you know, it just keeps bringing it back to bringing you back to the basics. If you know your degrees, you gonna always remember. You got to revert back to the 1st through the 3rd degree on anything in masonry.
What goes up must come down, right?
Right.
Yeah.
What did it say? Build your house on a firm foundation, for when the storm comes, the house won't fall over. You always got to make sure you come back to the foundation. There's no way around it. The first thing they check after an earthquake is the foundation.
Right. And the funny thing is, you know, when you look at a foundation of a house, me and my wife was talking about this. It's funny, here in Texas, you got to water your foundation.
Yep.
So it comes back to those elements again.
Yeah.
Yep.
If you got too much heat, your house breaks. Your ground get too dry, your house breaks. So all these things, you got to have the perfect mix of the 4 elements to keep your house together.
And see, that's why a lot of people, if you get into Hinduism and you know about the Shiva lingams, that is why they make offerings to it in the form of water, milk, honey, and these things, because that element, if it's lacking hydration, it will crack and break. If it is lacking water, then it will not stay its luxurious and smooth self. It will start to wither. All these things is basically going back to tell you to reconnect to the elements in which makes up the being as a whole.
Yeah.
The chalk and clay. I see what you're doing there. I see.
Yeah.
Guys, I see what you did there. That's good. That's good.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, brothers, this was a good one. We went almost 2 hours.
Yeah, we sure did, didn't we?
Yeah, I know y'all on the East Coast got to get some rest. I got to get up and get ready for work in the morning myself.
All right.
But great evening. I guess, what's next month's topic? Let me pull it up.
And I would just like to leave a good message to all our brothers that are out there and the sisters as well, is if you could take anything away from this, is to understand that the initiatic experience is a transformation that you have to be willing to go through. It's not just taking the degrees. It's not winning a seat and, you know, having a title and stuff like that. It's actually something that has to take place inside of you, and you have to be willing to do that.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Next episode is the different esoteric influences found in Masonry.
Oh man.
Okay.
That's a tough one. That's a tough one.
That's a tough one.
Yeah,
I mean, but we hit on them all the time. But yeah. And that's one right there. Oh man, shoot, we can go all day. I'm like literally so many things: astrology, astronomy. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Scottish Rite. You know, it is the college.
Yeah, that's right. Definitely is. It definitely is.
Yeah, Brother Javon Greenway says alchemy. Yes, alchemy. Everything you can find in there. But we're gonna dive a little deeper into it on the next episode.
Awesome. I appreciate all you brothers. It's good to see everyone is safe and healthy. Man, and I look forward every day to reading everybody's feedback in the group. You know, it's really beautiful to be around all you brothers, man, and then to get a chance to see some of you face to face.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thing, man, it really is. You know.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, all right, brothers. It's been lovely and been real. Till next month.
All right, brothers.
All right.